All right, welcome to the Kubeflow Pipelines community meeting. Today's date is July 30th, Wednesday, 2025. This meeting is governed by the CNCF Code of Conduct. The meeting is recorded and will be uploaded to the Kubeflow YouTube account after the call has ended. You'll also find the recordings for the previous meetings attached to the previous meeting notes for easier access. All right, so as always, we leave room for new folks to introduce themselves. So if you're new to the call or to the community, or if you've been around and haven't really done any introductions yet, you can use this time to go ahead and do that. So the floor is yours.
Hey everyone, my name's Christian. I'm a new contributor to Kubeflow Pipelines. Um, just saying hi. I work at Capital One and help support our internal Kubeflow Pipelines deployment over there.
Nice. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mustafa. I also work in Capital One and I work on KFP. I hope that I'll be a contributor to the platform as well.
Awesome. Welcome. Anyone else? All right, let's keep going. So just going to continue on with my regular reminders that V1 will be sunset at the end of the year. Do we have Alex here? I guess we don't today. I was hoping we could talk about some of the V1 API requirements, but maybe we can save that for the next call. Anish, you have the next topic.
Yeah, so there's a KFP Tecton repo in the Kubeflow org. The last commit was a year ago, 2 years ago. I don't think I say I don't think it's not maintained at all. I think it's probably confusing for people who are just looking at stuff. So I think we should archive it until, someone steps up saying they want to contribute.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Tecton's been removed as a optional backend engine. I think it makes sense to archive it. Any concerns about that? We can talk about who should take on this action item. Okay. All right. So who has the powers required to do this? So do I have it? I see settings. Hold on.
Might as well just do it now.
Yeah.
Let's see. I don't know. You don't have repository access.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd say you should probably reach out to the KSC.
Yeah. Okay, I'll
and
take on that
request
action
that.
item.
Okay, you can have one of the new maintainers do it,
Ah, that's right. We have 3 other maintainers. Any volunteers?
I don't mind.
Alex.
Will I screen share?
Basically, what you'll need to do is reach out to one of the Kubeflow steering committee members, to one of the Kubeflow steering committee members, and ask them to archive this repository. What you can do also is link them. Do we have it? How would I find it? Tecton. I think I can also close this out. Tecton has been removed from KFP. Okay. And you can link them this.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma.
So some folks are on the KSC that you can reach out to is Yuan or Francisco, and we can also sync offline if you need their full names. Cool.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Christian, you are next.
Yeah, I just came to talk about one of the PRs that I made. We internally maintain some Spark wrappers that we pass through memory requests and CPU requests through them, and so we use the KFP Kubernetes package to do that. And this happens at runtime, and the KFP DSL module only loads some of these imports at compile time that we use at runtime. So basically, I just made this PR to make that configurable. It adds another parameter to the pipeline decorator or the component decorator that lets you basically allow load those compile time imports. So in my mind, this was an opt-in thing because this can potentially slow down the component execution time if you're loading additional things that don't need to be loaded for your component. But for the use cases that do need to load these extra compile time imports, this would be there and available for it.
Yeah, I did leave a comment. I haven't read your reply yet. So what happens if you try to, oh, I see. You can't use package to install for the Kubernetes package? That won't work, right?
Packages to install would work to install it, but if you try to use it at runtime, they've got like the pipeline task. I think did I put the error message up there that I was getting? I forgot what it was.
No.
Oh, import. Yeah, there's just an import error whenever you try to use parts of the KFP DSL package at runtime that are only loaded at compile time, basically.
Yeah, so just to add to this, it's a conditional import that's contingent on a specific environment variable being set. The main problem is that environment variable is hard coded. It's the underscore KFP runtime environment variable. So there's no way to override it from the SDK, no matter what you set it to. The compiler will essentially re-inject it. But there's no way to kind of turn on those imports if you want to.
Okay. I think I'll have to take a look at this offline. I have some concerns about this. Largely, if my thinking is if package to install will work for this, is the main problem that if package to install works, it is not clear to the user that this is not available in this like environment, and
yeah, so the package is installed. It's just that because KFP runtime equals true is set in the environment in a hard-coded fashion, the import never happens. You never actually import the stuff you need.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's one line. It's one line in the init file that essentially handles the conditional import based on the environment variable. And the SDK is not at fault, really. It's just the problem is just that the compiler is hard coding that environment variable.
That sounds fine to me then.
Is there a reason?
Mhm.
I guess is there a reason to just not always import those or allow the import of those?
Yeah, I looked
Like
at the
what?
PR from Connor McCarthy, and he said it was to like improve execution time. I guess some of these imports take a little bit longer. I didn't see any kind of data to back that up. I'm kind of inclined to always import them as well. But yeah, that would
Do
be
you
a
think?
much simpler solution.
Right.
Yeah. Christian, do you think you could at least try comparing the speed of imports with and without that, just to
Yeah,
see
I'd
if
be
it's
happy to do that. I'd be happy to
it's
do
like half a second? I think I'd rather not introduce the flag and just always allow importing it.
that. Sure.
The thing with this is Kubernetes though, which is a separate Python package. Where when we default to an install in runtime, at least it's only KFP and not KFP Kubernetes.
Yeah, I think this is just some example code. I think the
I
error
see.
surfaces in other contexts.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think let's look into if we can keep this import always. Sounds good.
Now, I was just curious, like, do you have an example of how you're passing through some of those like node selector configurations to the Spark operator?
It's basically just like a wrapper around the Kubeflow functions for like setting memory requests and setting memory limits and stuff like that, and adding toleration.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The reason why I asked is I've been thinking about like how we integrate with like the Kubeflow training operator, for example, where it's like any sort of resources you set on the pipeline step is like not what you want. You actually want it on like the training job that it submits. And so I was wondering if you had thought about that, because like I guess the Spark operator is kind of similar, where like the node selector probably doesn't need to apply to like the pod that's like launching or creating the YAML.
Right.
And if you've thought about how that flow could be improved and stuff like that, that'd be something I'd be interested in tackling together. So
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't given that as much like thought and attention, but now that you bring it up, it makes sense.
It's something our end users struggle with, Matt. Like understanding that they have to configure their Spark cluster and the component that functions as both the client and the driver. We don't have those in sync currently. We have some like object-based configuration mechanism to simplify configuring the Spark clusters and DAS clusters and other distributed workloads, but it doesn't like automatically translate to configuring the component.
cool. Yeah. I need to spend some time just playing around to see what we could do to improve that. But since you're interested, I'll pitch ideas with you and CNCF Slack.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments about this topic? All right, Elish, you're next.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I was recently working on adding few workflows in our pipeline, and I found out that some of these workflows were taking around 20 minutes, and out of which 16-ish minutes was to create a cluster. I feel like there is optimizations that we can do in order to reduce that time, especially around, I don't want to suggest anything, but something that actually came out to me was building images and downloading those images every time a KFP cluster needs to be created. So if we can somehow try to cache those images, build it once, regardless of whether it runs in parallel or not. If it exists in cache, we just use cache rather than building it and or downloading it. So just a suggestion, and I think it should reduce our time. We should somehow reduce our time to create these clusters.
I just want to say I completely agree, and I appreciate the attention that that's getting. It's not optimized right now. There's a lot of room for improvement. Also, no, just thank you for your testing, Kep. Really excited for the refactoring that's going to happen there, and happy to help out with that. The other question that might be worth asking is, I think a lot of the workflows are doing things redundantly, and like sample tests, for example, are fairly similar to component tests. And the execution of the tests themselves is a small fraction of the overall execution time for that workflow. You could sequence multiple tests on a single cluster in a single workflow, and you'll probably significantly reduce the execution time that way.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. And just about the sample test, that will change once we get to the later phases of implementation of MyCap.
Nice. I'm excited for that.
Regarding building the image, there's an issue for that to separate the image build from the actual deploy. For using cache, I think we can do that with only GitHub Actions. We would need some external tool for that. Yeah, but just to let you aware that we have an issue for that, but not specifically for caching, but for separating both steps and leverage the image builds in subsequent steps. I can send you the link to the issue.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That'll be great. Matt?
Yeah, I think the only idea that was mentioned here that would actually improve time, like the CI time, is if we were able to do some level of image caching, which sounds pretty hard because like we're rebuilding all the images on purpose. So you need a mechanism outside of how Docker detects differences for caching. Because like anytime you're copying files into the container, it's gonna say that the cache is invalid from that point on. So yeah, because like, yeah, we can optimize the GitHub workflows by like just building the images once, for example, but it's not actually going to make it any faster because all the workflows run in parallel anyways. And actually combining tests to a single cluster will slow things down because we have unlimited parallel GitHub workers essentially. So actually adding more workflows would technically make it faster. So I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm a little bit skeptical of being able to actually significantly improve the speed, but we could definitely be a lot more efficient.
Yeah, I brought up something similar when Nilesh pitched this to me earlier today, because it doesn't really matter that we're building them 5 times if those 5 times you're building them at the same time. If you add like a preliminary step where you build them, you still build them. You know what I mean? It'll still your entire workflow will be as slowest as your slowest job. But I guess his response was that there are jobs that end up getting queued. I haven't personally witnessed jobs being queued. I think that with CNCF we have enterprise GitHub. So my expectation would have been that we don't get jobs queued. But if jobs are being queued, then this would increase time. Like to give you an example, if like E2 samples test is queued and then it has to wait for other jobs to finish, then it has to start rebuilding the images once it gets started. In that case, then it would have increased the time. So I don't know how prominent this scenario is, however, to warrant this effort.
Well, like I said, that's why I did not add any suggestion there. It's a concern that I added.
Yeah.
Rather than an implementation detail.
I wonder if there's a way. I'm not sure it's possible, but I wonder if there's a, because the most time consuming part I think is bringing up the Kubernetes cluster. So I wonder if there's a way to like bake that into an image so it doesn't have to happen every time. And then, that at least that part of the workflow could be expedited. I don't think that needs to be rebuilt every time we're targeting, as long as we're targeting a specific version of Kubernetes, it's always going to be the same. But I'm just speculating.
Yeah, I think it's good to point out the concern. There are other solutions beyond just image caching. Actually, no, Nilesh, did you look at it? I'm guessing it's the build times that take up like a large portion of it, right? I don't have, I'm throwing on, I think it'll be like an 80% of it, except for the tests that have like a lot of E2. I think some of the sample tests actually have the test runtime also around like 10, 15 minutes. The cluster setup itself is like around 10, 11 minutes on average, I think. Yeah. So it takes up a significant amount of time.
Yeah, in my case, my test ran within 10 seconds, but overall, I had to wait for 19 minutes.
Yeah, do the container image builds run in parallel? That's something we could probably do
Ooh,
to improve
I don't
things.
think they do. That's a good one.
Yeah, you could even have a bunch of separate workflows building the images, and then that would align with the one that the issue that Helber mentioned about like reusing the container image builds in all of them. So that's probably a way to significantly improve speed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just dropped a link to like a recent run on the master branch, and it's like 16 minutes for the create KFP cluster stage. I
Yeah,
don't know if
that's
that's just
no, that's what I was observing as well.
Yeah. I think this is a low-hanging fruit to parallelize the image builds. Oh, Helper already has an issue here. Can we do that first and see what the gains are there? And we can like slowly chip away at it.
Yeah, so if you parallelize the container image builds in different workers and then do this, like where all the steps reuse those container images, I think that would be successful. But I don't know if this is well captured in this one.
I think maybe can we repurpose this or create a new issue? Or to build it. I think the primary concern is that CI builds are taking a long time, and maybe if we can have a target time so that it's not a forever issue, what is reasonable to wait for a CI, and we can try to get it down under that like limit and try to come up with solutions. I'm fine with repurposing this issue because I think that's the main root problem I think that we're trying to solve.
I can take a stab at it while I'm at it.
Okay.
or whatever it's worth. Just just to put it into perspective, like 27 minutes is not crazy considering that just the scope and the breadth of all the things we're testing.
Yeah, it's actually the fact that we even have kind. Before kind, things would have taken a lot longer. So it's yeah. And you can also always run the tests in your local environment prior to, like, you shouldn't, the CI, like, we should always enable developers to be able to test their stuff locally quickly, and the CI is there for like more robust testing and testing various different cases. So you shouldn't be developing against like the PRCI, you know what I mean? You should have a pretty good confidence that like it's going to pass, and and if it fails, you should be able to reproduce it locally and test that way. So what is a reasonable time that we want to try to get down to for our longest CI job?
Let's try to reduce it by 5 minutes first. Anything achievable, right?
Okay, the issue is repurpose to reduce suggestion of the longest job. I'm guessing that's the E2E job, right? Of the longest likely E2E job by, can we put a percentage on it? Maybe. I don't know what the average is. Okay, 5 minutes. All right, I'm gonna assign you, Nilesh. We can repurpose this further to be a bit more clear. Hey, you're part of the community now, so let's see you. Okay. All right, so we have some steps to take. Nilesh, so you're assigned to this. You can also follow up and clean up that issue. Let me know. I can reword it as needed. Any other comments about this topic? All right. I have a topic. Actually, we can talk about that afterwards. Alex, you have a topic.
Sure. Yeah, so we discussed this yesterday, but I just wanted to put this out there to see if anybody else had thoughts on the topic. So we've requested that the V1 endpoints be preserved in the API for longer than the January 2026 target for deprecation for V1. And the rationale behind that is if you're already heavily invested in V1, having a runway for migration will make it easier for people. And we'll just give them breathing room to transition. And the suggestion is that those endpoints will be disabled by default and can be enabled through an environment variable that's provided to the API. And I'm just kind of, I guess the goal bringing this up in this context is, does anybody have any thoughts on this? Objections, concerns, or as like additional data points if you still have users using V1 and would benefit from having the V1 endpoints preserved for migration. That would be a valuable data point because right now we at Capital One are the only ones advocating for this, as far as we know, though we suspect others will be impacted.
I don't know who raised first, Nilesh.
I'm just curious to know what does the release process of this deprecation looks like.
Can you elaborate? Yeah.
In the sense that the concern is to keep V1 endpoints alongside V2, right? What does that mean in terms of releases, that it will still be a separate release when we deprecate V1, right? Do we want the users to continue using later versions with and expecting V1 to work, or like what is the concern?
Yeah, I think the goal with preserving the V1 endpoints is it wouldn't require a separate release. Anybody who's still using V1 can just set that environment variable and continue to use V1 alongside V2. And that's what's kind of complicated about our use case. But again, I suspect we're not unique in this, is we have majority of people on V1 and we want them to migrate to V2. So we're like a mixed use case. We have both V1 and V2. And so if we want to be able to pull in the latest changes from V2 while still supporting V1 endpoints, kind of like the state that we're in currently. But if the V1 endpoints were to be deprecated, then we'd have to choose one or the other or fork. And yeah, just trying to, and that's where the ask is coming from on our side. And curious if anybody else is potentially impacted in a similar way or has like people using V1 and V2.
I just want to just quickly add in, just so that we're like clear on our terminologies. V1 is already deprecated. We're talking about now in the context of removing V1. So just to be clear, like V1 is deprecated. Folks should be working on migrating, but you know, it's not easy to do. Folks have a lot of large pipelines, and this is to provide them with more bandwidth to be able to provision two V1 endpoints, or like if they have a pipeline that was rendered in as an Argo workflow, to be able to submit that and have the server be able to accept this. So we're specifically talking about paths here, like endpoints. So previously, and just again to remind everyone that our current goal is to have a last release with the V1 support that exists today in the V2 release. We will have that as the last release before we remove V1. Well, we were planning to remove V1 entirely. Now we are talking about preserving those V1 endpoints, but still removing the components, right? Because the components are what add a lot of the overhead, the components. And by components, I mean like metadata writer, cache server, visualization server. So in the development branch and ongoing minor releases, these components won't be included. The paths will still be, so if you are serving against the, if you're serving like V1 pipelines, then you would still be able, like it would still be accepted if you turn on that feature. Matt?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up that clarification, and then also the V1 components is the suggestion then that there would be like a separate branch on KFP with just the V1 components essentially. So you'd be using like the latest V2 or release with only V2, have manifests that enable the V1 endpoints, and then also deploy the V1 components? Or is it mostly like an internal thing where you just want the V1 endpoint so it's easier to fork? I guess this fork or separation of the V1 components, is it going to be public and maintained by someone?
Yeah, I think it would be nice for it to be public. That would be my preference, especially if other people could benefit from it. It's easy. It's obviously easier to fork manifests than it is to fork like an application, because then you don't have to contend with an image build and stuff like that. So I think whether or not it's public will probably be contingent on like appetite. I'd have to sync with our SRE team, would likely be the ones to maintain the manifest side of stuff. But yeah, I think overall the preference is for it to be public, because I think there's going to be other people like us who are going to want both. And it's
Okay.
just going to be the V2 manifests plus, a handful of components that were deprecated.
So in the release that we were aiming to remove V1, we're still keeping the V1 endpoints around, but configurable. Is that right? They'll be
That's
off
the
by
proposal.
default. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
V1 endpoints would be disabled by default, but can be turned on as a configuration option to the API server. All V1 component code and manifests will be removed in this release and future releases. Okay, so please take a look.
The
Mhm.
E2E tests would be removed as well, right? The
Yeah,
CI
yeah.
that test V1. Okay.
All CI and V1 testing will also be removed. Okay, in this release, and in the like development branch basically, which implies like every future release. Alex, et al. Are you guys in agreement with this? Does this like make sense?
Absolutely. We really appreciate you guys being accommodating around this. And yeah, I think this makes perfect sense.
Okay. This release will be supported at minimum for 6 months and is upper bounded until as maintainer bandwidth permits. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, cool. I'm just gonna bold that. All right. I'll forward this to the V1 deprecation discussion thread. I'm using that as a source of truth for like all V1 related discussions. All right, where are we at time? We have 5 minutes. Okay. I have a topic. So previously we encountered a scenario where we were hitting forward compatibility issues where we would introduce new fields into like the Kubernetes platform, and it would break on older backends because those were unknown fields, and we were erroring out on unknown fields. So like we made for things like the driver, we made unmarshalling to allow unknown fields so that we could add new fields into the Kubernetes platform, and it wouldn't be it would still work on older packets. We had a discussion. So when I made the PR to do that, I actually made it across the board, and then we had a discussion about not wanting to do this for the API server. I don't recall exactly the reasoning for why. It was a while ago for why we didn't want to do this for across the board for API server, but in the proto update that I was doing, I found that the proto JSON unmarshalling actually has that as a default setting, and to allow unknown fields, and it made a lot of sense to me. In that, like, it really gives us a lot of flexibility in being able to add new fields and have it work with older backends. or rather, I guess in this case, have older clients that are communicating be able to against older backends, right? So what is the rationale for not wanting to do this? Is there Matt?
I think it's you don't know when you've specified like a new field or a new feature that's not supported in the KFP backend. So if I'm using a newer SDK, I use a new feature, adds a field in the IR, the backend's just going to accept it, and I won't know that it ignored it.
Yeah, we can warn on unknown fields as a workaround. But I guess
How do you surface that warning?
Yeah. I still think it's preferable though. It makes it, we take a hard stance on like by having erroring on this like you have to have the right fields, but we lose out on that flexibility. I would prefer that we have that flexibility to add new fields and have things work on the older backend and just have good documentation. Like we have API docs and what have you. Nilesh?
Do we have any difference between objects in V1 versus V2? Will that compatibility break?
Objects in V1
meaning, so the request payload in V1 may not have certain fields that V2 uses, or vice versa.
There really isn't such a thing as it's just V2, but we have we have V1 alpha 1, yeah. We have those APIs. But I don't know. Matt?
Yeah, I think I prefer keeping it the current state and just reject unknown fields. I'd rather just have predictable behavior because I think most people are just going to be doing pip install KFP. It's going to pick the latest SDK, and they will have no idea what backend they're submitting against if it's like some corporate provided installation.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'd rather be on the safe side to just be like, just don't allow unknown fields.
Yeah, I see. But now that we have minor releases tied to each other, doesn't that alleviate that concern?
Maybe. Are you
Michael?
suggesting that like the SDK, when you upload a pipeline or submit a pipeline definition, like the SDK version will be checked by the backend server and like
I don't want to do that.
warn the user of like, hey, this is newer?
Yeah, I don't want to do that. Michael?
Yeah, okay.
No, I was just gonna mention like that was really the only way that I could even think of like how would you know with like the versions aligning in future releases, like how would the backend know without having to check the version that is coming from the IR? Like if the field is available or not. But yeah, it's
Yeah, okay.
avoiding that check would be best.
Okay. You guys have convinced me. I'll get off.
Although
For now.
we probably should verify that the error message is reasonable, that the user knows to maybe check the SDK version they're using.
We don't want to do this. We should, however, verify the error message here is reasonable when unknown fields are encountered. Yeah. I think it would just throw a regular, yeah. Okay, we can check on the error. All right, any other topics? All right, we're 1 minute over. Cool. Thanks, everyone. See y'all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.